Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smart Grid Forums. My name is Mandana White, and I'm the CEO. And today, I'm delighted to welcome to the channel Cristoph Brunner, who is the convener of TC57 Working Group 10 and the president of IT for Power. Welcome to the channel, Christoph. It's great to have you on today.
Hi, Mandana.
So, Christoph, you've kindly agreed to speak at the IEC, SGF IEC Week 2023 conference that we're holding in October in Amsterdam. And in fact, this is the 10th year, the 10th edition of this conference. And I believe you supported us in every single edition. So it's great to have you again this year. And I wanted to, in advance of that, just to give our viewers a sneak peek into some of the areas that you're going to be addressing at the conference. But before we do that, it would be great to catch up on some of the activities of the working group, and also for those who are new to 61850, more broadly about the history, the background of the standard, and how it's making a difference in the power grid sector. So let's start right at the beginning, Christoph, if I may. In terms of 61850 and how it sort of started about 20 years ago or so, tell us a bit about the history, the drivers for the standard, how it came about, the working group activity, and how we got to where we are today.
Okay, so it basically started, well, I think it's almost 30 years ago now, if I remember correctly, in 95, when we first created the ad hoc working groups. So the first work was really ad hoc working groups that were looking into the possibilities to standardize in the area of substation automation. That was originally initiated at the TC57 plenary meeting in Sydney at that time, where the German utilities basically pushed that proposal forward to start standardization in the substation area. Based on that, it was decided to create an ad hoc working group looking into how to address that. And the outcome was then discussed again at the next TC57 plenary in Minneapolis at that time. And it was decided to create the three working groups, 10, 11, and 12, which were focusing on the topics, 10 on the so-called common matters, 11 at that time on what we considered will be a station bus, and 12 what will be a process bus. So that was more or less the start of it. And the first series of standards were finished somewhere between 2002 and 2005. The part 10 about testing was the last one to be finished in 2005. Nevertheless, the first projects that used 61850 had been realized at the end of 2004, where basically 61850 communication was used. Engineering process not yet to a large scale at that time, but still in principle was used as well.
Okay. What were the initial drivers for the standard? It's a communication protocol within the substation, but of course over the years that remit has expanded, and now it's aiming to do a lot more. But what were the initial drivers for setting up the standard?
Initial drivers was really interoperability, if you want. I mean, in the past, before we had any substation automation systems, relays were wired into the system, mechanical relays were wired into the system. It was easy to have devices from multiple manufacturers, a gateway or the SCADA, the RTU that received the wires could be from any vendor. With the introduction of microprocessor-based relays in the early 90s, this became more challenging because the different vendors had different communication protocols now that they were using to the gateway. I mean, the RTU has become a gateway that converted the protocols the vendor were using into the SCADA protocol.
Right.
And as every vendor had different protocols, it was not that easy anymore to mix the systems. So that was one of the drivers. Also the communication, the wires between the devices, when we wanted to replace them with communication, required a certain standardization in order to achieve that.
Right. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, so Christoph, in terms of where we are now, I mean, it's a long way from the beginning, as you said, about 30 years on, and many utilities have adopted 61850. Many pilot projects have been run successfully. And what we're hearing at Smart Grid Forums is that the utilities are really keen to engage their boards for longer term investment and larger scale deployment of the standard, not just within the substation, but externally as well, more broadly across the smart grid. So what do you see as being some of the success factors for the utilities who are managing to engage the boards for these long-term projects? How are they doing it?
Well, there is different approaches. I mean, probably out of scope in the discussion here is the classical approach that we have a lot of utilities are using today 61850 in that way, like they did before 61850. So they more or less put out a tender for a substation. One of the vendors will get the project. They will deploy it, maybe with integrating relays for main two protection from other vendors. But it's more or less vendor-driven or integrated-driven approach. So in this case, a lot of 61850 are used, and that probably doesn't require a long-term planning.
Right.
There's, however, a few utilities that are more looking into really doing the top-down engineering process. So they are more trying to have long-term plans, and there, of course, it requires a certain approach to do a funding. I mean, some approaches, some utilities, they started with some pilot projects where they probably could get research money as well. So they could combine that with research project. And based on that, they could then develop their plans. Other ones have really long-term strategic plans, how they will develop, gradually get more and more involved into 61850 to have its full benefit. Very often now, recently, I see that as well coupled with plans to go in the future as virtualized devices or centralized protection, virtualized protection, all around these topics. That's also some of the strategies where 61850 gets into the play.
Yeah, great. Okay. I know you've been working with lots of new utilities with their on their 61850 strategies and deployment plans. Who are some of the most innovative utilities that you're working with at the moment, and what can others learn from them?
Well, I was recently involved in two projects that took completely different, but both very innovative approaches. One of them was the Stadtwerke Hamburg, where they really took an approach with the top-down engineering process, where they created the detailed data model that they require for their systems and put that out as a tender, and the vendors basically replied to that. So they did a very detailed specification from a perspective of the data model, incorporate as well some to some level centralized protection. I mean, it's a process-based approach, and to some level they integrate multiple protections for multiple bays into one bay level, but one bay level device. And also there they created the detailed data models, how they would like to have that structured. So the top-down engineering approach really starting consequently from their own specification. Another project that's what is ongoing from Elian, where they have a focus again on the specification, but they're on the level to get more or less completely document independent to be able to specify the whole project in an electronic version, including the possibility to verify the specification already at specification stage through simulation of the design. So they already have a detailed functional design built in. And that's what they are currently doing, a proof of concept to verify that this works. So I think that's probably the second one I would say. And I think both of them already have been presented at previous 61850 Global Weeks.
They have, and we'll be hearing updates from them this year too. So that will be very interesting. So Christoph, on the level of the working group itself, what are the priorities right now? What are the topics and subject matter that you're most excited about working on?
Well, I would say the most innovative work we are currently doing. The first one is related to the project I just mentioned from Elia, the formal specification. So for that, we are working on a lot of extensions to the 61850 engineering process. One of them is linked to the basic application profile, where we had created a few years ago a technical report that explained how we can define a basic application profile as on a textual basis. And now we are working, how can we specify these basic application profiles, including the design in STL, in a way that tools later on can automatically take those profiles and instantiate them so that the integration gets much faster. So that's part of this whole specification improvement. Then, of course, also attached to the specification functional behavior, like in a 61131 logic design, that we can specify logic as well in a machine processable way, which is a key component again when we want to do functional simulation at an early stage to verify the design. Second area I would say is the system management. It's work that is ongoing, where we are looking into ways that we can manage IDs that are installed in the substations from remote. Managing means possible software upgrades that are required, but also download of new configurations, possibly when there's changes in the system and we need to change the configuration, that this management can be done from remote. So that's the second area. That's a technical report we are working on, 80-7. The third area that I would mention is the communication to the control center with 61850, so where we have more or less a seamless communication from the models that we have in the substation up to the control center or up to other applications on enterprise level, using directly the 61850 communication, so that we don't really lose the content of the models that we have in the 61850 world.
Right. Okay, that's great. In actual fact, this year we're going to have 3 tracks at the conference. So one track, as always, on 61850. We also have another track on the Common Information Model, which is the predominant standard in the control center. So it will be interesting to see or to hear some sessions about the interworking of those 2 standards. And then finally, a third track on 62443 for cybersecurity. So, Christoph, what will you be sharing with participants at this year's conference in October?
Okay, I will have the pre-conference workshop, which is again introductions into 61850.
Yes.
And then I will have a paper where I talk again about the latest ongoing work in the standardization in 61850 standardization. I'm not sure yet which topics I will select, but I definitely will select some of the actually ongoing topics.
That's great. Yeah, well, we look forward to hearing your updates on that. And of course, we're hoping to welcome many more participants, particularly those who are just starting on their 61850 in the organization, to help those change projects and to drive the large-scale deployment of the standard. So, Christoph, thank you so much for your insights today. Really appreciate your time. And thank you, as always, for your dedication and support of the event as well. We look forward to seeing you in October in Amsterdam. That's the SGF IEC Week 2023 event on the 16th to the 20th of October at the Park Plaza in Amsterdam. Until then, Christoph, have a great day. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye for now.
I hope to see many of my friends there.